My name is Callie Mercer. I'm 31 years old, and the night my life almost ended, my mother was 3 hours away at a blackjack table. I want you to hold that for a second before I tell you the rest. Because everything that follows the money, the dinner, the folder, the thing my grandfather said that made my aunt put her coffee cup down and never pick it back up, it all starts there. In a curtained bay in St. Anthony's Hospital, with a punctured spleen, 2 broken ribs, a newborn daughter in the NICU, and a phone call that told me exactly who my mother was when the stakes were real. Her name is Brenda. Brenda Jean Mercer, 58 years old, former church treasurer, current fixture at the Prairie Wind Casino in Council Bluffs, Iowa. The woman who organized the bake sale every Easter. The woman who sent Christmas cards with Bible verses on the inside. The woman who, when my husband Marcus called her at 11:14 on a Tuesday night to tell her that her daughter was in emergency surgery and her 6-week-old granddaughter was alone in the NICU, said, and I want you to hear this the way Marcus heard it, in that flat, careful voice people use when they're trying not to fall apart over the phone. I can't leave right now. I'm in the middle of something. Claire never has these situations. Claire is my younger sister. She was in kink N. There was a cat. There is always a cat. Mom said she was watching Claire's cat. My daughter's name is Wren, 6 weeks old, 4 pounds, 14 ounces when they discharged her. She has my grandmother's nose and my husband's stubbornness, and she has never once in her small, brave life been anything other than perfect. The night of my accident, she was alone in a hospital, bassinet under warming lights while a nursing staff who didn't know her name yet watched over her. Because the woman who should have been there chose a slot machine and a borrowed excuse. I didn't cry when Marcus told me. I want to be clear about that. I had a chest tube and a morphine drip and a cast on my left wrist, and approximately 4 hours of consciousness left before the pain meds pulled me under, and I did not cry. I triaged. That's what I do. That's always been what I do. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. And drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back, because you need to understand who I was before that hospital bed. Because the story doesn't start with the accident. It starts 11 years ago, with a woman standing in a parking lot of a county fair, handing her mother $40 she didn't have, telling herself this was the last time. It was not the last time. I grew up in Millhaven, Nebraska. Population 6,000 and a grain elevator. The kind of town where everybody knows your business before you do, and the Dollar General is considered upscale retail. My father, Dennis Mercer, worked road construction for 23 years. Same crew, same highways, same thermos of black coffee every morning at a.m. He died of a heart attack at 52, sitting in his truck in a Hardee's parking lot. I was 19. My sister Claire was 16. After Dad died, the shape of our family shifted the way a house shifts after a flood. Things that were load-bearing before became decorative. Things that should have been decorative suddenly had to hold weight. I was the thing that had to hold weight. Mom grieved in the way people grieve when grief is also convenient, loudly, publicly, and with a rotating cast of people to perform it for. She joined a grief support group at First Methodist. She accepted casseroles. She told anyone who would listen that she didn't know how she'd manage. And she didn't manage, technically. She had me for that. By 21, I was sending her $300 a month. Grocery money, she said. By 24, it was $600. The water heater, the property tax, a dentist bill she couldn't cover. By 27, when I married Marcus, and we moved 40 minutes east to Omaha, it was $1,200 a month, structured and automatic and labeled. In my banking app, with a name so simple, it felt almost honest. Mom support, $1,200 a month, $144,000 over 11 years. I had never once added it up. Not because I couldn't. I am a licensed CPA with a client list that includes 4 regional businesses and a county government. I add things up for a living. I didn't add it up because the total felt like a door I had been walking past for 11 years. And I knew, on some cellular level, that opening it would change everything. The accident opened it for me. The accident happened on a Thursday in March. I was driving home from my last late shift before maternity leave officially ended. Wren was 6 weeks old. I had negotiated 3 extra weeks with my firm, unpaid, but worth it because she had come early and small and needed more time before I could think about leaving her. I was 40 minutes from home. The intersection of Route 9 and Miller Creek Road. A pickup truck ran the stop sign at 52 miles per hour. The collision investigator told Marcus later that I had turned into the skid, which had probably saved my life. A cracked steering column, 2 broken ribs, a punctured spleen, a fractured left wrist, and a concussion that would give me headaches for months. I don't remember the impact. I remember a white flash, and then I remember the ceiling of the ambulance and a paramedic saying, "Stay with us, Callie," in a very calm voice that told me the situation was not calm. Marcus was in Denver. Work conference. Second day of 3. His phone rang at 11:07 p.m. Mountain Time, and he was on a flight by 12:15, but Denver to Omaha is 2 hours in the air and then an hour by car. And Ren was in the NICU and I was in surgery, and someone needed to be there. Someone needed to be Ren's person for the night. Marcus called my mother at 11:14 p.m. She was 47 minutes from St. Anthony's. I know because I have driven that road. 47 minutes. Flat Nebraska highway. No traffic at 11 at night. She said she couldn't leave. She said Claire's cat needed feeding. She said Claire never has these situations, and she went back to whatever game she was playing. I came out of surgery at 1:42 a.m. The first thing I said when I could form words was, "Where is Ren?" The nurse told me she was in the NICU stable, being monitored, that the staff was with her. Marcus called from somewhere over Kansas. His voice was doing that thing. The flat, careful thing. "Your mom isn't coming. I know. Your aunt is on her way. She'll be there in 2 hours. My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, 64 years old, lives in Lincoln, had driven through a March rainstorm in the middle of the night without being asked twice. She got to St. Anthony's at 3:15 a.m., sat in the chair beside Ren's bassinet, held her small warm hand through the access port, and texted me a photo at 3:22 that I have never deleted. "She's got Dennis's chin," Patricia wrote. "She is absolutely going to be trouble." I looked at that photo in my hospital bed for a long time. Then I looked at the 4 in my arm and the cast on my wrist and the ceiling tiles, and I made a decision so quiet it didn't feel like a decision at all. It felt like something shifting in the floor of me, something that had been loose for 11 years finally clicking into place. I picked up my phone. I opened my banking app. I went to recurring transfers. There was one label, Mom Support, $1,200, first of the month, active. I pressed cancel. A green check appeared. Recurring transfer canceled. I put the phone down. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel sad. I felt the way a spreadsheet feels when the columns finally balance. Clean, accurate, done. Then I opened my messages and typed to a contact I almost never used. A contact saved as Grandpa Walt. 3 words. "We need to talk." The response came in for minutes. Not a text. A phone call. Walter Gaines, 79 years old, my mother's father, calling from a landline in his house in Cedar Falls at a.m., like a man who had been waiting by the phone. "I know," he said, before I could speak. I heard. Patricia called me. "Grandpa." I canceled the transfers. A long pause. Not the pause of surprise. The pause of a man choosing his words. "Good," he said. "It's past time. Now you rest. I'll be there in the morning." And Callie. Another pause. "Don't tell your mother I'm coming." I didn't ask why. Some part of me already knew. You should know who Walter Gaines is before he walks through that hospital door. Because he matters. He matters in the way quiet people matter. Slowly, thoroughly, in ways you don't fully appreciate until they're the only person standing between you and a fire. Walt is 79. He was a postal route supervisor for 31 years in Cedar Falls. He has the kind of hands that look like they've moved a lot of furniture and fixed a lot of things that weren't supposed to need fixing. He smells like coffee and the particular brand of cedar soap he has been buying from the same hardware store since 1987. He is 5 feet 10 and has been shrinking since he turned 70 and refuses to acknowledge it. He was married to my grandmother Eleanor for 53 years. She died 18 months ago. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. I drove to Cedar Falls every other weekend during those 14 months and sat with her when the days were bad and learned to make her potato soup from the recipe she kept on an index card tucked inside her Betty Crocker cookbook. Eleanor was the one who first said it to me. We were sitting in her kitchen 2 weeks before she died, and she looked at me across the table with the particular clarity that comes near the end when there's no more energy left for pretending. And she said, "Callie, your mother has been using you since the day you were old enough to have something to take. I have been watching it for 30 years, and I am sorry I didn't say it sooner. Walt knows. He's known longer than I have. When I'm gone, let him help you. Promise me." I promised. I think she knew even then that she was building something, that the promise was a door she was leaving open. Walter arrived at St. Anthony's at 9:47 the next morning. I know the exact time because I was watching the door. He walked in carrying a thermos of coffee he had made at home and a manila folder so old the edges had gone soft, bound with a rubber band that had been on it long enough to leave an indentation in the cardstock cover. He set the thermos on the tray table, poured me a cup without asking, sat down in the vinyl chair beside my bed, looked at me at the cast, at the bruising along my collarbone, at the place where the four met my arm, and his jaw worked for a moment. "Your mother told me you'd had a little fender bender," he said. I looked at the ceiling. "She told me not to rush." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then he set the folder on the foot of my bed, like a man setting down something he had carried a very long way. "I knew," he said, "about the money, about where your mother has been spending her time, about what she's been telling this family while she cashed your transfers on the 1st of every month." He paused. "Eleanor knew too. It's why she did what she did." I waited. "Not today," he said. "You've had enough for one day. But your mother is going to come at you when she finds out about the transfer. And when she does, she's going to perform. She's going to get the family in a room and she's going to perform." He tapped the folder once. "When that happens, I'll be there. And I'll bring this." I didn't ask what was in the folder. "Not yet, Grandpa." My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "What did Grandma leave?" He picked up his coffee. "Everything she had. And she had more than your mother knows." He looked at the window. "Eleanor was a careful woman. She planned for exactly this. For exactly you." He left an hour later so I could sleep. He did not tell my mother he had been there. 3 days after the accident, when they moved me out of the ICU and into a regular room, and Marcus had brought Ren up in her car seat so the 3 of us could exist in the same room for the first time, my mother called. Not to ask about Ren, not to ask about my ribs or my spleen or the wrist that would require physical therapy for months. She called because the 1st of the month was 9 days away, and she had just noticed, for the first time, that the automatic transfer had been canceled. I let it ring twice. Then I answered, "Callie, honey," sweet as pie, the voice she uses on church committees and bank tellers and anyone she needs something from. "We've been so worried. How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I told her I was recovering. I kept my voice level. I have been keeping my voice level with Brenda Jean Mercer for most of my adult life. It is a skill I have developed to a high degree of precision. That's so good to hear. "Listen, honey, I was looking at my account, and I think there might have been a banking error. The regular deposit didn't come through this month." I told her it wasn't a banking error. A pause. The temperature of the call dropping by degrees. "Well, what do you mean?" "I mean, I canceled it, Mom." Callie, the sweetness curdling at the edges, the way it always does when she realizes the approach isn't working. "After everything your father and after everything I have done for you, the sacrifices. You don't know what it cost me to raise you girls alone after your father." I let her run. She is good at running. She has been doing it for 11 years, and she has never once run out of material. And then she reached for the weapon. The one she has been using since I was 19. The one that has never once failed to make me soften, to apologize, to wire the money and tell myself I had been unreasonable. Claire never has these situations, Callie. She never does this to me. She never creates this kind of drama. And there it was, the same sentence Marcus had heard at 11:14 on a Tuesday night when I was in surgery. The same sentence she had built her entire argument on. The sentence she believed was a guilt delivery system. She had no idea it was a receipt. "I know, Mom," I said. "Claire doesn't have these situations because Claire has never been put in the position of having them." A silence. "I don't know what that means." "I know you don't." I looked at Ren in her car seat, asleep, perfect, 4 pounds, 14 ounces of everything that mattered. "I have to feed the baby, Mom. I'll be in touch." And I hung up, for the first time in 31 years. I hung up on my mother before she was finished talking. Marcus looked at me from across the room. "Proud of you," he said. I didn't feel proud. I felt the way you feel after a tooth comes out. The absence where something used to be. Not relief yet. Just the shape of where the pain had lived. She sent my Aunt Deborah next. Deborah is my mother's younger sister, 53 years old, and has been borrowing Brenda's opinions since childhood. The way some people borrow shoes, comfortably, without thinking about the fit. She texted me 2 days after the phone call, a paragraph of borrowed outrage that arrived at a.m. on a Saturday. "Callie, I am absolutely shocked. Your mother is beside herself. Your grandfather raised her to put family first, and this is not what family looks like. Your father would be ashamed of you for abandoning your mother in her time of need. Family takes care of family." I read it twice. The line about my father almost got me, the way those lines always almost get me. Because my father was genuinely a good man, and the invocation of his name in service of bad arguments has always been my mother's sharpest tool. But then I thought about what Walter had said. Eleanor planned for exactly this. For exactly you. My father would not have been ashamed of me. My father would have been furious at what had been done in his absence. I didn't write a paragraph back. I didn't defend myself or explain or soften it. I opened a new message to my grandmother's estate attorney, a woman named Grace Holloway whom I had met once, at the reading of the will. A small, careful woman with silver-framed glasses and the kind of still competence that makes you feel like every problem is a form that just needs the right signatures. I had called Grace the day before. I now had numbers. I had a picture. I had 11 years of bank statements. And a pivot table I had built one-handed on Marcus's laptop that showed exactly where $144,000 had gone. I attached a single page to Deborah's message thread. 12 rows. 11 years. Every dollar sorted by destination. "This is where the money your sister says she manages on her own actually went," I typed. "The Prairie Wind Casino is 3 exits from her apartment. The withdrawals are consistent, monthly, almost all cash. Ask her." Then I put my phone down and held my daughter and let the numbers do what numbers do. They sat there, being true. I need to tell you about the spreadsheet because the spreadsheet is the whole thing. The spreadsheet is where 11 years of believing I was doing something good became 11 years I could see all at once on a single page. I built it in the hospital, 3 days after the accident, with my right hand, because my left was still in the cast. Marcus propped his laptop on the rolling tray table and I exported 11 years of statements, every account, every month, and dropped them into a pivot table. This is what I do for a living. I do it for county governments and regional businesses and family estates, and I am very good at it. I sorted $144,000 by actual destination, and here is the picture that assembled itself, row by row. In the blue-white light of a hospital room, the utility bills my mother had cited for years, the ones I believed my money was covering, showed consistent municipal auto payment. She had been paying her own utilities for most of the decade. She had let me believe otherwise. The property tax I had helped with twice, maybe 3 times in 11 years. Not the ongoing contribution she had implied. My sister Claire's expenses showed up as a second stream, not small, not irregular. Rent assistance that had continued even after Claire got a full-time job 3 years ago. Car insurance. 2 months of what appeared to be a gym membership and a meal kit subscription under Brenda's account that were charged to a card linked to my transfers. And then the main river. The one that ran deeper and faster than anything else. Cash withdrawals. Hundreds of them over 11 years. Neat, consistent, dignified in their smallness. 200 here, 300 there. Never large enough to look like anything on its own, but a pattern, visible now that I was looking for it, concentrated in a geographic cluster. I pulled up a map, Prairie Wind Casino, Council Bluffs, Iowa. My mother had not discovered gambling after my father died. My mother had been gambling throughout. The transfers from me, the grocery money, the utility money, the emergency fund I thought I was building for her had been running parallel to the withdrawals for 11 years. I had been funding a habit she had hidden from everyone, including, I suspected, herself. $144,000, 11 years, the casino portion. Conservatively estimated, $89,000. I sat back against the hospital pillow and let the numbers say it, because numbers, unlike my mother, have never once lied to me. I printed the summary to a single page on the unit's bedside printer. 12 rows, clean margins. My name at the top as the source account, her account as the destination, the withdrawal location cluster in the third column. I folded it and put it in Ren's diaper bag under the wipes. It's handled, I said out loud to no one. And for the first time, those words felt less like triage and more like a verdict. The family dinner invitation came on a Wednesday. It arrived as a group text to the Mercer Gaines family chain. 11 people, mostly aunts and cousins, a few people I hadn't spoken to since my father's funeral. My mother's name at the top. I'd like to invite everyone for Sunday dinner to welcome baby Ren and clear the air as a family. Callie, I hope you'll come and we can put this misunderstanding behind us. I've made the pot roast everyone loves. 5 o'clock. A misunderstanding. The woman had sat at a casino while her daughter was in surgery and her newborn was alone in a NICU. She had told Marcus on the phone that his wife never has these situations. She had canceled a casserole she never sent. She had called 9 days later, not to ask about my recovery, but to ask about her money, and she was calling it a misunderstanding. Marcus read it over my shoulder and said, very quietly, "You don't have to go. I know. We can stay home with Ren. Let her sit in it." I looked at the text. I thought about what Sunday actually was. It wasn't to welcome Ren. She hadn't held Ren. She hadn't asked about Ren by name in any of our conversations. Sunday was to get me in a room full of family and soften me and perform reconciliation. Until I turned the money back on and we all agreed to call it a misunderstanding forever. She wanted an audience for my surrender. I decided to give her the audience, just not the surrender. I texted back to words, "We'll be there." Then I called Walter. He answered on the second ring. I told him about the dinner. There was a pause, not surprise, the other kind. The kind that means I expected this. "You want it quiet," he said, "or you want it true?" I looked at Ren asleep in the crook of my right arm. This small person I had nearly not come home to. This person who deserved to know the truth about where things came from and who showed up and who didn't. "True," I said. "I want it true." "Then I'll bring the folder," he said. "And I'll come in after you're already inside, so she doesn't see us arrive together." "What's in the folder, Grandpa?" A long pause. Then, "Eleanor's work." "What?" "She spent her last good months building." His voice roughened at the edges the way it does when he talks about her. "She couldn't fix it before she went, but she made sure it would be fixed after. She just needed you to be ready." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to Marcus breathe and Ren's small sounds from the bassinet, and I thought about Eleanor Gaines sitting in her kitchen with an index card and a Betty Crocker cookbook and a plan she'd been building for longer than I knew. I thought about a promise made across a kitchen table. Let him help. You. I was ready. Sunday came gray and cold the way March in Nebraska comes, the kind of cold that isn't dramatic, just persistent, like a conversation that won't end. I dressed carefully. Dark jeans, a gray sweater, Marcus said, looked professional. Ren in her car seat in a white onesie with small yellow ducks on it, because she was 6 weeks old and perfect. And I wanted her dressed like herself, even if the room we were walking into was not going to feel like itself. I still wore the cast. My wrist wouldn't be healed for another 3 weeks. In the driveway, before I got in the car, I did something I had been thinking about for 2 days. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the hospital ID band, the one from St. Anthony's. It had been on my wrist for 5 days before they discharged me, and I had cut it off that morning, but kept it. This soft gray strip, with my name and birth date and admission number printed in small black type. I folded it once and tucked it into my coat pocket, a small, quiet piece of proof of exactly where I had been on a Tuesday night when my mother chose not to come. The house I grew up in sits on Clover Street, 3 blocks from the Methodist church and 2 blocks from the elementary school where I got a perfect score on the 3rd grade, spelling bee, and nobody in my family came to watch because Mom had a committee meeting and Claire had a dance recital, and those things came first. The porch light was on when we pulled up. Through the front window, I could see them, Aunt Deborah on the couch, my cousin Tara and her husband near the fireplace, my Uncle Greg in the kitchen doorway, and my mother moving among them with a coffee pot, playing hostess, playing the wounded matriarch, playing the role she has been playing for 30 years in a house I helped pay for. Marcus carried Ren's car seat. I had the diaper bag. I stood on the porch for a moment and looked through that window and thought about every holiday I had driven to this house, every check I had sent, every time I had managed my mother's feelings instead of my own, every time I had called it love, when what I should have called it was a lease I had been paying on without a key. Ready? Marcus said. I nodded. We went inside. My mother is, I will give her this, an exceptional performer. She has the timing of someone who has been managing rooms her whole life. She turned from the stove when we walked in, and her face arranged itself, the relief, the warmth, the slight glassiness in the eyes that signals impending tears, and she crossed toward Ren's car seat with her arms already open. Marcus stepped between them, not rudely, not dramatically. He just angled the car seat and said, "Hi, Brenda," in a normal voice, and the reach became a pat on his arm and then a half turn to the assembled family. "She's finally here," my mother said to the room. Her voice was doing the tremble it does when she wants sympathy but hasn't earned it yet. "My little girl. And the baby." A pause for effect. "After this terrible week, my terrible week. The week she had spent at the casino and then calling me about money." She turned to face me fully. Aunt Deborah was watching. Uncle Greg, Tara, 2 cousins I barely knew. All of them assembled, all of them ready to witness whatever performance came next. And then my mother delivered it. The line. The same line she had delivered to Marcus at 11:14 p.m. The same line she had used on the phone when I canceled the transfer. The same line Deborah had borrowed for her text. Said now to the full room, with wet eyes and a voice pitched for the back row. "I just want my family whole again. I don't understand where this anger comes from." She looked right at me. "Claire never does this, Callie. Claire never creates these situations. For times." She had handed me the weapon for times and she had no idea she had done it. The room waited. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I reached into the diaper bag under the wipes, exactly where I had put it, and I took out one folded page. I unfolded it on my thigh, smoothed it flat with my good hand, walked to the dining table and set it in the center where the light from the overhead fixture fell directly on it, and then I spoke in the same voice I use when I'm presenting a quarterly audit to a client board. "You're right, Mom. Claire never has these situations. I'd like to show everyone why." The room went still. "This is every dollar I sent to this family for the last 11 years. 144,000. 12 rows. Every source and every destination." Aunt Deborah leaned forward despite herself. "The top 2 rows are accurate. The property tax twice, 3 years apart. Real expenses, real need. I was glad to help." I paused. "The rest is the part Mom describes to everyone as managing on her own." I touched the 3rd row, $89,000. Withdrawn in cash over 11 years, almost always within 4 miles of the Prairie Wind Casino in Council Bluffs. Never any single amount large enough to notice, but consistent, monthly, the whole run of it. A sound went through the room. Not a word. An intake of breath. The sound of a story cracking. My mother's mouth open. I continued, and a second streamed $22,000 to Claire's accounts. Rent and car insurance, continuing after she got her full-time job 3 years ago. I didn't know that until I sorted the statements. I don't believe Claire knew where it came from. I looked at the room. Deborah had gone pale. Greg was looking at the floor. Tara had her hand over her mouth. The night I was in surgery, I said, my daughter was alone in the NICU. I asked for one thing. One night, someone to be with Ren for 4 hours until Marcus could land. I kept my voice level. The answer was the casino and a cat. And then 3 days later, the first question was about the transfer. I looked at my mother. So when you say Claire never has these situations, you're right. Claire never had to. My mother had stopped performing. The tears she had summoned for the room were still on her face, but they had nowhere to go. The wounded matriarch posture had collapsed into something smaller, something cornered. She reached for her last tool. You have twisted this. You have taken everything I ever did for you and twisted it into something ugly. I am your mother. I raised you. Your father. With the front door open, Walter Gaines came in out of the cold with his cane and his Sunday flannel buttoned to the throat and the manila folder pinned under his arm. He moved carefully, the way he always moves now, deliberately, like a man who has decided that every step is worth taking and none of them should be rushed. He had timed it exactly right. He had been sitting in his car at the end of the block, waiting. He had not told my mother he was coming. The room noticed him, the way rooms notice certain people, not because he was loud or dramatic, but because he was Walter. And Walter had a gravity that had nothing to do with noise. Deborah straightened. Greg stood up from the kitchen doorway. My mother turned, and her face did something I had never seen it do before. It went afraid. Dad, she said. What are you? Hello, Brenda. He said it quietly. He did not go to her. He walked to the dining table, set his cane against the edge, and placed the manila folder beside my single page. The rubber band was so old it barely held. He worked it off with careful fingers and opened the folder. I knew, he said. Not to my mother. To the room. To Deborah and Greg and Tara. To every person my mother had been performing for. I always knew. Eleanor knew too. He drew out a document from the top of the folder. Thick. Official. A law firm's name, Holloway and Associates. Cedar Falls on the letterhead. Your grandmother, he said, looking at me, spent the last good months of her life with her attorney. She moved everything she and I had built, the Cedar Falls property, the joint accounts, the savings that were supposed to go to the whole family, into a trust she named and structured herself. He set the document on the table. Eleanor Patricia Gaines's last act was making sure that the person who had been carrying this family for 11 years would never have to carry it alone again. He looked at the room. The trust does not go to Brenda. Simple, clean, the way Walt says hard things, without ornament. It goes to Callie and to Ren. There is an education fund for the baby. There is a property account for Callie and Marcus. And there's one more thing. He reached back into the folder. A letter. Eleanor wrote it in the last week she was well enough to hold a pen. I am going to read part of it, because Eleanor believed in saying things in front of people, so there's no revision afterward. My mother said, Dad, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, he said. I want to. He put on his reading glasses. The room was completely silent. He read, Callie, if you are hearing this, it means Walter found the right moment. I hope it didn't take too long. I have been watching you carry this family since you were 19 years old, and I have been ashamed of my own silence for most of that time. Your mother learned something from me that I wish she hadn't. She learned that there is always someone else who will manage the weight if you simply refuse to pick it up. I taught her that by refusing to see it for what it was for too long. I am not leaving you money because I think money is what you need. I am leaving you money because I want you to have the time to be Ren's mother instead of everyone else's resource. That is what I should have been protecting all along. The house in Cedar Falls, your grandfather's, and mine is yours. Not to sell unless you choose to, but to know that it exists. That there is something in this world that was built for you on purpose. Your mother is going to say that this isn't fair. She is going to say that family should share. Let her say it. Family should also show up. I have watched who showed up for 30 years. The decision made itself. Take care of Ren. Let Walter bring the folder. Keep the promise you made me in the kitchen. All my love. Grandma Ellie. Walter folded the letter and put it back in the folder. The room was very, very quiet. My mother's face had gone through several things while he read. First, the prepared counter-argument, then the realization that a counter-argument would not land in front of this particular audience. Then briefly, something real, something I had only ever glimpsed once or twice in 31 years, in the back of her eyes, behind the performance. Something that looked, if I squinted, like grief, not for me, for herself, for the version of herself she might have been if she had made different choices across different years, and then it was gone. And she pivoted to the one move she had left. "I'll contest it," she said. Her voice had gone flat. The performance was over. "That's my mother's estate. I'm her daughter. I have rights," Walter answered, before I could. Mild, even, the voice of a man who has spent 50 years watching his wife be right, and has learned to speak in her register. "You can try, Brenda." Grace Holloway has been practicing estate law in Iowa for 30 years. Eleanor was of full and documented capacity. There were 2 witnesses and a notary. "I've already had the document reviewed by a second attorney." A pause. "It will cost you more than the trust is worth to fight it, and you'll lose." Eleanor knew your exact argument before she made the decisions. She planned for your objection the same way she planned for everything. My mother looked at me. Her eyes had something in them I did not recognize at first. Then I did. It was the same thing I had seen in the faces of clients over the years, when the audit reveals what they feared it would reveal. Not anger exactly, not grief exactly, recognition. The recognition of a person seeing themselves accurately for the first time and finding the view unbearable. "You're going to take everything," she said. Quiet now. Not performing anymore. Just a woman standing in a room where the story she had been telling had just been replaced by the true one. "I'm not taking anything, Mom." I kept my voice even. What Grandma left is what she chose to leave. I didn't ask for it. I didn't know the specifics until 3 days ago. A pause. "And I'm not coming after what's yours. The house is yours to live in as long as you want. Dad's insurance goes where it goes. I'm not fighting you for anything that was ever actually yours." She looked at the table. At my single page beside Walter's folder. "The transfers are done," I said. "Not as punishment. Because they should have been done years ago. And the accident made me honest about it." I picked up the page, folded it, put it in my coat pocket. "If you want to know your granddaughter, that door is open. But it opens with honesty. Not with a group text about pot roast." Deborah, to her credit, had not said anything since I'd put the paper on the table. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at my mother. Then she looked at me. And she nodded, very slightly, in a way that told me she would tell the truth when people asked. Not because she was on my side exactly. Because she had seen the 12 rows, and 12 rows are not something you argue with. My mother opened her mouth once more. I think she was going to try the health card. Something about her blood pressure, her nerves, the stress of all of this. But she looked at Walter, and Walter was looking at her with an expression that contained 58 years of knowing her, and she closed her mouth. I went to Marcus. He put Ren's car seat in my good hand and picked up the diaper bag. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the hospital band. The gray paper strip with my name on it, worn soft from 5 days against my skin. I did not say anything about it. I looped it once around the handle of Ren's car seat, quietly, just rested it there against the yellow duck onesie. Not a speech, not a statement, just a small true thing, where I could see it every time I carried her. Walter gathered his folder. He replaced the rubber band with the careful deliberateness of a man who knows that some things need to be kept together. He picked up his cane. The 3 of us, 3 generations my mother had not planned for in the same room, walked back through the kitchen, through the front hall, out into the gray March cold. I pulled the door shut behind me, softly, not a slam. A click. The sound of someone who has stopped waiting for something from the people on the other side. Here's how it settled. Because I know you want to know. The trust held. My mother contacted 2 attorneys in the following 3 weeks. Both told her the same thing. Eleanor Gaines had been meticulous. The documentation was clean. The capacity was documented and witnessed. There was no angle. The calls stopped. The Cedar Falls property, a small house on a corner lot with a garden Eleanor had planted and tended for 40 years, is in trust for Ren's education. Marcus and I are not selling it. We drove out there in April, the 3 of us, and walked through it. The Betty Crocker cookbook was still in the kitchen. The index card with the potato soup recipe was still inside. I kept the recipe card. I put it in Ren's memory box. My mother still lives in the Clover Street house. I did not move to take it. There is a version of this story where I did, and I thought about it for a long time and decided that putting a 58-year-old woman on the street, whatever she had done, was not the thing my grandmother had built this for. Eleanor had built it to protect me, not to punish my mother. Those are different things. The Prairie Wind Casino still exists. My mother still goes. But she goes on her own money now. And whatever she does, there is between her and her choices. And not a thing I fund or think about past PM on a weeknight. Claire found out in June. Not from me, from Aunt Deborah, who had told everyone by then, which is what I knew would happen when I looked at her across that dining room and said, I know you'll tell the truth. Claire called me. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, Callie, I didn't know. And I believe her. Claire is many things, but she is not a liar, and she was not part of the architecture. She was a person who had been given a story about where things came from and had never thought to question it. She texted me a week later, 3 words. Where did it go? I sent her the single page. She hasn't asked me for anything since. And the last time I saw her, she paid for her own lunch without the slight pause that used to precede someone else picking up the check. That felt like something. Aunt Deborah told everyone the truth. Exactly as I predicted. The Mercer Gaines family group chat went very quiet for about a month, and then gradually refilled with birthday announcements and recipe shares and the normal static of people who have processed something uncomfortable and decided to move forward without addressing it directly. That is fine. That is most of what families do. My father's sister Patricia, the one who drove through the rainstorm at a.m., comes for dinner every other month. She taught Ren to clap at 4 months and cried about it both times, once when it happened and once when she told the story at Christmas. Walter moved from Cedar Falls in the fall. He is 12 minutes from our house now, in a small rental with a garden bed. He is already planning for spring. He comes on Sundays. He brings the folder every single time and sets it on the bookshelf in the living room and says, in the same dry gravel voice, in case anyone forgets, Yvette the night nurse Marcus had called that first night, the one who had let herself into our house and texted me the photo of Ren's fist against her cheek, stayed for 2 weeks while my ribs healed. She still sends Ren a card on her birthday. The photo she texted me from the NICU at 3:22 a.m. is printed and framed in Ren's room. She is asleep. Her fist is against her cheek. She does not know yet what the night cost, or who showed up and who didn't. She will know someday. I will tell her when she's old enough, and I will use plain words, and I will show her the folder if she asks. My mother has not called since the dinner. Not to apologize. Not to ask about Ren. Silence again. But this time the silence is hers. She is the one maintaining it, and I have made my peace with the fact that some people can only stay in relationship with you when you are useful to them and choose distance when you stop being useful, because distance is easier than being seen. I don't hate her. I have spent a lot of nights making sure I understand the difference between anger and hate, because one of them makes you sharp and precise, and the other one just keeps you in the room with the person you're trying to leave. I think Brenda Jean Mercer is a woman who was handed fear at such a young age that she mistook it for personality. I think she spent 50 years making sure there was always someone between her and the hard things. And when my father died and that arrangement became less sustainable, she looked around for the most capable person available and used her like a faucet uses a glass. That person was me. I understand it completely. I am still done. Ren is 7 months old now. She has 4 teeth and a very strong opinion about mashed peas, which is that they are an affront. She has her great-grandmother's nose and her father's stubbornness and a grandmother in Cedar Falls who left her a house and an education fund and a recipe card. And the only thing she ever asked of me in return was to keep a promise in a kitchen. I kept it. Here is what? 11 years, and a hospital band, and a grandfather with a folder taught me. The people who call you the strong one are not complimenting you. They're naming the arrangement. They're telling you what role you play in their story and congratulating you for playing it well. And they will keep you in that role for as long as you let them. Because the strong one never needs anything. And not needing anything is enormously convenient for everyone who has decided not to provide it. The day you stop being their bank is not a tragedy. It is a Tuesday. And what comes after it, if you let it, is the life you would have been building all along. If someone hadn't handed you the weight at 19 and smiled when you picked it up. I am 31 years old. I have a husband who flew home from Denver in the middle of the night without being asked. I have a grandfather who sat in a car at the end of a block and waited for the right moment. I have a grandmother who spent her last clear months building something she wouldn't live to see open. And I have a daughter in a yellow duck onesie who will grow up knowing that the people who show up are the only people who count. That is everything. That is the whole account, and it is the first time in 11 years it has balanced. If this story reminded you to check one bank statement tonight, just one take, that is your sign. If you know someone who has been